Welcome to a terrifying tour of the darkest corners of Nickelodeon. In this video, we will unravel the chilling secrets and urban legends that have surrounded your favorite TV shows. Do you dare to face this scary side of childish fun? Join us if you dare. It seemed to be a normal day in Bikini Bottom. That day, SpongeBob asked Patrick if he wanted to go out to catch jellyfishes after work. However, Patrick made a weird expression and said, "Do you know what a starfish is actually eat, SpongeBob? Here, let me show you." Then, Patrick explained how the stomachs of starfishes extend out of their bodies to penetrate their prey and inject a deadly liquid into them. Bob was dumbfounded, and he would soon realize he had just discovered the most evil side of the starfish who he thought was his best friend. Patrick then extended some sort of tentacle from his insides and pierced SpongeBob's yellow body. Shortly after, Bob collapsed, completely destroyed. After eating Bob's entire body, Patrick then went on to spread chaos across all of Bikini Bottom. Many of the citizens tried to stop him and avenge Bob, but the evil of Patrick Star just couldn't be stopped that easily. How could he do that to his supposed best friend? Sandy was furious about this, so she quickly planned her revenge. She grabbed a huge katana and managed to slice Patrick Star in half. That way, Sandy expected to finally end his destruction besieging Bikini Bottom. However, what Sandy didn't know was that starfishes can actually regenerate. Patrick's two severed halves regenerated, becoming two Patricks and thus multiplying their strength and evil. And the worst part is that dividing Patrick only increases his appetite for destruction. Sandy managed to escape and, very scared, went into the Krusty Krab. There, Mr. Krabs asked her where the heck was SpongeBob, that he was late and the customers were about to arrive. However, having witnessed how Patrick killed Bob and half of their neighbors, Sandy explained to Mr. Krabs what happened and asked him for help. They started by covering the windows to prevent Patrick from coming in. He had already killed half of the town, so they had to do everything they could to try to protect themselves. Sandy was extremely scared. She knew that evil starfish was still out there, and he knew exactly where she was. And she wasn't wrong. Quite suddenly, a horrible sound scared Sandy and Krabs even more. It was one of Patrick's tentacles, which had broken through a wall. In a few seconds, they heard Patrick's terrible voice. "It's one of my tentacles, hasn't I, Sandy?" And she was precisely his next prey. Do you want to know how the rest of this story plays out, TikTakers? This is just the beginning of a horror comic titled The Bikini Bottom Horror. As you've seen, the protagonist of this comic is an evil Patrick Star who, after discovering his dark side, can't help but kill everyone in sight and spread panic. This clashes head-on with the idea of the SpongeBob world we all have in our heads. Especially because in the show, Bob and Patrick are best friends. We are used to just seeing them getting into trouble or having a good time in Bikini Bottom. In these illustrations, we can find Sandy, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, Plankton, Larry, and even Bubble Bass. And although it has a lot of references to the original show, everything in the comic is very dark and terrifying. Like in many other instances, this is a creation of a fan of the show. It was published on the website Still in the Simulation, and from then on, we've been checking more episodes. You can really tell how the comic has evolved, as the drawings have been improving over time and the story keeps going. Many people on the internet have enjoyed this horror comic very much, and it has many fans following it very closely. SpongeBob was created by Stephen Hillenburg and premiered on Nickelodeon in 1999. From then on, but especially from the year 2000, millions of children and adults keep watching SpongeBob's adventures in Bikini Bottom either on TV or online. Do you watch the show TikTakers? Do you prefer the nice original version or the death and destruction of the bikini bottom horror? Who knows? Maybe both worlds could collide one day in the future. Today, we'll be taking a look at the creepy side of the Loud House. Do you dare come with us? Lincoln, you can come downstairs. Breakfast is ready. With that innocent call starts this strange episode of the Loud House titled Lynn's Lament. Shortly after, Lincoln is seen coming into the kitchen, but he's wearing a squirrel costume. It's the same one he used in the episode No Such Luck, when his family believed that he was a bringer of bad luck and that the costume negated the effect. The episode continues and Lincoln sits at the table with his sisters. His father tells him that he can take off that dumb costume and that they no longer believe he's a bringer of bad luck. All the sisters seem happy for Lincoln, except for Lynn, who's looking at the floor with a worried expression. The rest of the family notices and Lenny asks her what's going on. And while all the sisters seem to have accepted that Lincoln is not a bringer of bad luck, Lynn suddenly says, "I don't trust you, Lincoln. You're still bad luck." Her sisters try to persuade Lynn to give Lincoln a chance, and she finally gives in. The next scene takes place a day after. Lynn tells the family that in 1 week she will have the most important soccer match of her life and needs someone to help her train. All the sisters point on Lincoln, saying he would be the best person for the job. Lynn still doesn't trust him, but even then she accepts and lets Lincoln help her train. It seems that many days pass between that scene and the next one, where Lincoln and Lynn can be seen in the backyard. But for some weird reason, they look bruised and beaten up. However, what happens next is wholesome. Lynn sees how nothing bad has happened during her training, so she apologizes to her brother for not trusting him. Lincoln forgives her and he stays outside for a bit longer. However, Lincoln then sees how Lynn left her favorite sneakers outside, so he goes grab them to bring them back to her. But with such bad luck that just when he was about to call his sister, he steps on Cliff, the family cat. Cliff gets really mad and it starts scratching Lincoln everywhere, leaving scratches on him that look weirdly realistic. And in the middle of that outburst of scratches, Lynn's sneakers are destroyed. Lynn, after hearing Lincoln's screams, rushes to help him, but when she sees how her precious sneakers are now destroyed, she gets furious and yells, "Look what you did, Lincoln! You always wear and you will always be bad luck!" And then a heated fight between the siblings starts. Their fight gets so intense that Luna has to intervene to break them apart. The parents end up scolding Lynn for getting so angry and hitting her brother, but she's still furious and it looks like she won't forgive him. The next scene shows Lynn in the middle of her important soccer match, and sure enough, it ends in disaster. Lynn plays terribly and even ends up scoring in her own team's goal, giving the victory to the other team. And then, as the rival team starts mocking her, Lynn's teammates also start yelling all kinds of insults at her, not believing that they all lost the championship because of her. It gets so bad that the entire Loud family goes into the field to comfort Lynn. They all hug her and she seems to feel better, but she then sees her brother Lincoln and rage invades her once more. However, she manages to contain herself, and even though her face tells a different story, she calmly asks to just go back home. Once there, it can be seen how everyone gets ready for bed, but Lynn has other plans. She asks Lincoln if they can talk outside. He accepts and also tries to comfort her for everything that happened in the match. But in that moment, Lynn approaches her brother and starts telling him that everything that happened was his fault and that she hates him. And once she stops insulting him, she tackles him into the floor. Lynn goes completely berserk and starts beating up Lincoln with kicks and punches. In this heart-wrenching scene, it can be seen how Lincoln's bones gradually break and how he gradually loses his consciousness as well. And finally, Lynn jumps on his head with all her might, breaking open his skull. Lincoln's brain is now exposed and his wounds look so realistic that they are sickening. The entire scene is strange and unsettling, and Lynn's eyes seem to reflect both fury and satisfaction. Then, after hearing all the commotion, her parents come out to see what's happening and end up weeping after seeing the corpse of their son. Shock and grief completely overpower them until the father screams at Lynn, reviling her for the atrocity she has just committed. The entire Loud family is crying in grief, but Lynn seems to not feel anything. That is, until the father gives her a hard slap in the face, which makes her come back to her senses and realize what she has done. She has just killed her own brother. The next scene shows Lincoln's unsettling and eerie funeral. Then the screen turns black, and the last scene shows Lynn's dead body hanging from a tree, who couldn't overcome the guilt of her actions. Welcome back, horror lovers. Surely many of you are familiar with the cartoon show Rugrats, but we bet most of you are not familiar with the creepy origins of this show. This story has been circulating on the internet for a long time now, but the production staff has always denied it being based on real-life events. So we invite you to watch this video until the end and draw your own conclusions. It is said that this show came about from the testimony that psychologist Susanna Carmichael shared with the Nickelodeon network a few decades ago. Through this production, Susanna wished to share with the world the truth about the life of her best childhood friend, Angelica Pickles. The babies in the show were actually the product of Angelica's imagination. Her stepmother always ignored her, and her relationship with her father was painfully superficial. So, due to the lack of attention she had to endure, she decided to create her own world filled with imaginary friends and adventures. Chucky actually died when he was very little along with his mother, traumatizing his father and turning him into a nervous wreck. Tommy, the show's protagonist, was born dead. And so his father would spend every day in his basement making toys for a baby who never came into the world. And in regards to the DeVilles, their twins also passed away during pregnancy. Angelica never knew if the twins were boys or girls, and so she invented one baby boy and one baby girl, Phil and Lil. The only baby who wasn't a product of Angelica's imagination was Dill, Tommy's little brother. However, she couldn't distinguish the difference between her imaginary friends and her real ones. Little Dill never followed Angelica's orders, and so one day, in a fit of anger and desperation, Angelica violently beat him up while yelling at him. The many blows Dill received resulted in serious brain damage and ended up deforming his head. And as he grew up, other kids would mercilessly bully him for his deformity and cognitive disability, making him feel like an outcast. Now, regarding Angelica's parents, her biological mother died shortly after she was born, and her father married another woman. Little Angelica was very fond of Cynthia, a plastic doll that wore an orange dress and had a few strands of short hair on her head. The doll was old and a bit broken, but it reminded Angelica of her biological mother, so Cynthia was the world to her. Years later, premiered All Grown Up on Nickelodeon, a show about the lives of the Rugrats in the future. The purpose of this show was to portray Angelica's life during her pre-teen years. At the time, her mental state had deteriorated even more, which made her change the appearance of her imaginary friends. She now imagined her baby friends as pre-teens just like her. Angelica also became addicted to narcotics at the time. She was obsessed with the past, and remembering how much suffering she caused Dill constantly tormented her. Trying to drown her sorrows in drugs, she ended up passing away from an overdose. Susanna, known during her childhood as Susie, was Angelica's best real-life friend. Susie would always play along with Angelica, pretending that her imaginary friends were real. This relationship is what inspired Susanna to become a psychologist, in order to help people like her dear friend. Years later, she made a deal with Nickelodeon to tell the world the story of Angelica, and that's what led to the creation of Rugrats. Angelica died from an overdose when she was very young. Imagining friends around her and playing with the lives of her creations. The legend of the lost episode of The Fairly Odd Parents, titled Due Date, is circulated on the net. The episode begins with its usual intro, and right after, Timmy appears sitting on his bed with a large bruise on his eye and bloody injuries. Soon, a surprised Wanda appears and asks what happened to him. The little boy, with a lot of difficulty speaking because of the bruises, answers that Vicky has hit him again. At that moment, his magic godfather appears and insists that he should call them in those situations to help him. Timmy opens his mouth to tell them something, but immediately afterwards he falls silent and lowers his head. Cosmo realizes that he's hiding something, so with the help of Wanda, he sweetly gets the little boy to confess what is happening. Unlike the rest of the people, Vicky had managed to see Wanda and Cosmo, and she had threatened to beat him and his godparents if she found out he was asking for their help. Poor Timmy begins to cry, and his godparents comfort him by telling him that they will do everything they can to prevent Vicky from hurting him again. The next day, Timmy doesn't have school, and since he's still sore from his beatings, he wishes for a pizza and a video game so he can spend the afternoon entertaining. A few minutes later, her mother comes into the room and tells him that she has some errands to run with his father. In order not to leave him alone, they have called Vicky to take care of him. Timmy begins to shake. His parents leave and his godparents appear. The little boy implores them to hide. If Vicky found out that he was talking to them, she would be very furious. Vicky starts yelling the boy's name from the hallway, laughing wickedly. The Fairly Odd Parents don't want to leave Timmy alone and stay with him. Listening to the little boy talking, the nanny realizes that he's accompanied. She enters the room and starts throwing everything in her path everywhere. The Fairly Odd Parents appear and disappear, moving from one side to another to avoid being hit. Meanwhile, Timmy hides under his bed and Vicky manages to reach Wanda and shakes her hard. With the blow, the godmother hits the ground and Vicky crashes her head with her food, making her skull crack. Cosmo goes to help his partner, but it's too late. The godfather is brutally thrown against the wall, leaving his face disfigured and bathed in blood. Everything becomes a blur for Timmy. He can't believe his godparents are dead. Vicky looks at him defiantly, and the little boy looks for something to defend himself with. He notices that next to the pizza, there is still the knife with which he had cut a piece. He uses the weapon to defend himself and sticks it in Vicky's eyes, first in one and then in the other. Then he stabs her relentlessly to death while yelling, "This for Cosmo and Wanda, this for hitting me, and this for bullying." Shortly after, the little boy's parents arrive home. They enter the room to see how he is, but what they discover is their son completely gone, with tears in his eyes and Vicky's head in his hands, grabbed by the hair. Timmy keeps repeating in a monotone voice, "Your due date has arrived." Juan's mother had forced him to spend the afternoon with his cousin Jesus. He was 3 years younger than him, so he didn't like playing with him too much. In the end, his cousin wanted to continue watching cartoons and he didn't like them anymore. But he had no choice. It was Tuesday and his aunt knocked on the door at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She and his mother went to the mall to go shopping and left them alone. It would only be a couple of hours, they said. And there he stayed with a little boy with whom, like a good pre-adolescent, he didn't know what to do. He offered to play a game of play, but he hardly knew anything and was bored. Then they went out to the garden to play soccer, but he was not having fun either. Until he came up with an idea. "What drawings do you like?" he asked him. The little boy said, "Lazy Town." So his older cousin quickly typed that into his tablet. Several chapters appeared, but one that said Chapter 0 caught his eye. He quickly clicked on the link. He wanted to get the kid off his back as soon as possible. He saw how the header started. It was in black and white, so Juan thought, what weird drawings, they seem to be from another era. But since he didn't know them, he continued to look at them calmly. The title read, Zombie Invasion. The first scene showed Stephanie talking with the rest of the characters in a relaxed way. But soon Spartacus arrived to propose going to the cemetery. That's weird, said Jesus. The truth is that Juan had stayed watching the video. He was curious. So he asked him, why is it weird? Because they never go to the cemetery. They continued watching, and indeed, the characters were heading there. As they arrived, they could see Robbie Rodden watching them from around the corner. That made Jesus look surprised. He was starting to get scared, even more so when he was heard to say, it is time for these kids to know what real fear is. Then they saw Robin take out some kind of green injection and open a huge wooden box. Inside was a corpse, but it wasn't just any corpse, it was totally emaciated. It had an eyeball hanging out and its brain was showing. It was absolutely disgusting. Juan hesitated to stop the video. Even for him, those drawings were too strong. But he didn't because at that point they were both very intrigued by the ending. They continued to watch as Robbie placed the corpse on some bushes and injected it with the green liquid. At that moment, the body began to move, like a real zombie. Pixel, who was looking in that direction, reacted quickly and alerted the others to what he was seeing. What is that? He shouted. The corpse was moving in their direction, so the boys started running as fast as they could. But Ziggy tripped and ended up on the ground. That's when the corpse caught up with him and bit him. The cousins were already very scared, but they couldn't take their eyes off the TV. Within seconds of watching that thing bite Ziggy, they saw his body begin to change. He looked very strange. He had turned into a zombie. Then he turned to the camera and said, I'm coming for you. The two boys clenched their hands. They were terrified. The following scenes show Ziggy himself chasing his friends, who despite hiding always ended up being hunted. What came next left them completely frozen. They saw images of their own city. It was absolutely desolate. They passed by the mall, and there they could see their mothers turned into zombies trying to bite other people. They watched them leave, and immediately afterwards the doorbell rang. They both looked at each other and panicked. But Juan said to his cousin, Don't worry, I'm sure it's them. They forgot their keys. Together, they went to open the door, but behind it were their mothers turned into zombies, accompanied by Ziggy, Trixie, Spartacus, and the others. They were going to fall too.
The series Hey Arnold is an animated series that tells the life of a 9-year-old boy with his friends. One of the most emblematic characters in the series is Helga, a girl with a strong character who likes to annoy Arnold by calling him a football head. However, the reality is that she hides a secret love for him. It is said that the creator of the series was based on the childhood appearance of Frida Kahlo for the character of Helga, but netizens have found a dark origin in Moscow, Russia, where a girl with a traumatizing history existed several years ago. She was a 14-year-old girl with bad behavior and bipolar disorder named Helga. The girl had become very aggressive, so her parents decided to take her to a psychiatrist and hospitalize her. After a time of progress, she was admitted to a school to start a new life with other guys. A few days later, the students distanced themselves from her, labeling her as the weird girl of the school. However, one of those boys, Arnold, felt very sorry for her and decided to strike up some conversation with her. After receiving several angry reactions from the girl that scared him, Arnold also decided to walk away. And there the problem began. Helga had a strange obsession with him. She spied on him all day, even sneaking out of the house at night to see him asleep from the window. When the boy found out, he got scared and told his parents, who very worried spoke with the girl's family. Helga returned to aggressive behavior. Not even her own family could control her, so they put her back in the hospital for a while against her will. But a week later, the young woman managed to escape from the center to look for the boy. Again, she was found spying from outside Arnold's window, so they called the authorities, and this time they admitted her to a psychiatric center with greater security measures. However, Helga's attitude didn't improve. She wanted to escape and devised a plan. She cut her hand on purpose, so she was taken to the hospital. There, she took the opportunity to flee again. Days later, Helga's lifeless body was found in an alley near Arnold's house. When forensics analyzed her body, what they found left them cold. She had tattooed with cuts the name of her impossible love and a phrase that said forever. Alex, at 5 years old, was totally obsessed with Paw Patrol. In his room, he had the figurines of Chase, Marshall, Sky, Rocky, Zuma, and of course, all his school supplies were on this theme. In his family, this fact didn't surprise anyone, because all children with his age adored those cartoons. Alex's friends also carried all their Paw Patrol things, and they knew the names of the characters by heart. For this reason, as the child's 6th birthday approached, his mother came up with the idea of preparing a themed party. But she wanted to do it in a great way, so she was going to need more help than a few wall stickers. She searched on the internet for a company dedicated to children's parties and found dozens. She established an order among the closest ones and prepared to call. Most of the companies simply offered decoration, but nothing more. She wanted something big. People dressed up as the Paw Patrol, entertainers, special games, but finding that was harder than she thought. Finally, after consulting some 20 web pages and calling as many telephones, she found a person who told her that what she wanted was possible. And the funny thing was that she didn't find it on the internet, but in an advertisement posted on the notice board at her son's school. The fact was that she had it, and she was very happy about it. The company seemed perfect. They told her that 5 people would attend the party. 3 of them would be disguised as the best-known characters of the Paw Patrol, and the other 2 would be in charge of planning and organizing the games. Everything was ready, so nothing was needed but to wait for the day to come. Meanwhile, they went on with their lives. Alex continued to enjoy each day with new chapters of the Paw Patrol, and his mother organized the fringes of the party. And it all had been worth it. Alex's mother was very happy to see her son's face discovering all the details. The child came to the living room and he couldn't believe his eyes. He kept saying, "It's amazing. It's incredible." It had become clear that he had loved the surprise. Soon all his friends began to arrive, to whom he kept showing all the details of the birthday party. When no one was missing, Alex's mother told the 2 entertainers that the party could begin. At that moment, they made a signal for the 3 people disguised as the Paw Patrol to enter. They were from Chase, Marshall, and Rocky. The kids at the party gasped when they arrived. They were amazed seeing those perfectly characterized life-size puppies. At that time, the animators told Alex's mother that the adults could wait over coffee, while they proceeded with the games. The children would be always supervised by adults, and they would let them know when it was time for the cake. The parents agreed and went to the kitchen for a drink. The children stayed in the backyard with the 5 workers, who immediately began to explain the first game. It was a classic. The children had to try to hunt down the other companions by running. This time, the only strange variation was that they had to push them instead of just touching them. The children at the party were between 5 and 9 years old, and none of them wondered too much if it was right or wrong. They were so delighted with this theme party that they just listened and obeyed. And so the game began. They ran one after another trying to reach the adversary and throw him to the ground. Luckily, and because they were in the garden, none of them got hurt, but some of them started making strange faces. They didn't want to hurt themselves, they just wanted to play. But everything continued, and the next game was not long in coming. This time it was to play in pairs. The party organizers had put up 2 wooden platforms for each pair, and they also had a kind of long pole. Each member of the pair had to get on one of the platforms and grab a stick. The game consisted of getting the opponent to leave his platform. The game was well known, but some of the children were too young, and there was quite a difference in age, so the problems were not long in coming. One of the younger children began to cry because the blow with the stick had hurt him. But to the surprise of the others, he was only comforted by the other child in front of him. No one from the team approached him. The child soon calmed down and the games continued. Alex was having a good time. It was one of the best days of his life. But suddenly he began to remember his mother and wanted to see her. He was a very polite boy, so he raised his hand and asked one of the entertainers if he could go to the kitchen to say hi to his mother. The man replied that no, there were more games to go before the cake, and then he could go. Alex nodded and didn't protest, but was actually quite sad. He tried to focus on the next game. They were going to start explaining it. This time it was a fight simulation. Some children found it funny, but Alex grew sadder and sadder. He didn't like fights. Then he started crying. His cousin Carlos, 3 years older than him, approached him to ask what was happening. Alex told him that he didn't like that game. It was his birthday and he wanted to decide the games himself. Carlos consoled him and told him that they would soon finish, and then he would choose. Alex believed him and, crestfallen, joined the group. The organizers of the party behaved in a strange way, while the children played fights, laughing and without hurting themselves. They encouraged them to hit harder or hit directly in the face. Some children, encouraged by the elders, began to give real blows, which ended with several little ones crying. This situation alerted the parents in the kitchen, who immediately went out to see what was happening. One of the organizers, with a very kind demeanor, explained that some children had broken the rules of the game and they had hurt their teammates. The children immediately began to protest, but the parents, thinking it was a tantrum, believed the adults. As spirits were a bit low, they decided it was time to stop for a snack and blow out the candles. The children, by approaching the food and chatting with each other without the impositions of the adults, became much happier. The cake moment was great. Alex's mother had ordered a maxi cake, of course, also from the Paw Patrol, and Alex didn't want to be separated from her. He held her tight and with his mother's hand blew out the candles. She did not understand why her son grabbed her so much, but she was delighted with it. They distributed pieces of cake when finished. The adults returned to the kitchen and the children to the garden. Once there, the organizers of the party explained to the children that they were going to carry out a competition. The 3 who won could take a tour of the city with the spectacular Paw Patrol cars. They showed them photos and they were amazing. The kids were absolutely blown away. They explained what the game consisted of. It was a kind of gymkhana in which the children would have to pass a series of tests. In them, force, speed, ingenuity, or other characteristics would be measured. The children didn't understand very well what a gymkhana was, but they only thought about getting into one of those Paw Patrol cars. The first test was to run through the garden. It seemed simple, but it had an added component. One of the entertainers, disguised as Marshall, from time to time, pushed or made one of the children go to the ground. So the race in the end was not as fun as they had imagined, and some children were bruised. The second test was of ingenuity in pairs. One of the members of the couple remained tied, and the other, using different tools, had to untie him. In the box they were given, there were some knives, scissors, and other materials that are not suitable for children. That scared some of the elders, who told them that they would not play with that. But in the end, they ended up giving in to the blackmail of the Paw Patrol cars. One of the animators hardly participated in the game because he was recording all the time. The children used to cameras did not care. Some even joked with them. My mother will be angry when she sees the video. The test of wits was fatal. There were 2 injured children who would not stop crying. Their companions courteoused them when trying to untie them. Every time the screams were heard, louder despite the organizers trying to calm them down. Then one of the animators accompanied them inside so that they could heal them. One of them was Alex, who quickly ran into his mother's arms. She stiffened terribly at the sight of the blood. The cuts were small, but Alex started yelling that he didn't want to play with those men again. They were mean and they hurt them. The adult who'd accompanied them tried to hide, saying that they were children's things, that nothing had happened and everything was going great. But the parents were no longer calm, so some of them decided to go out into the garden to see what would happen. There, who already imagined that this was going to happen, they were playing a memory game, something very innocent and very simple. They had to replace a puzzle with an image that they had seen previously. The animators had already collected the knives, so the parents seeing the scene were much calmer. They saw how two cousins of Alex and a friend were the winners with the car trip. The parents didn't know about this, but the animators advised them that it was agreed with Alex's mother. At that time, she was treating the wound of the two children with cuts, so she could neither confirm nor deny. In the end, under pressure from the children, the parents gave in and gave permission. The three children got into each car. They were impressive because they looked exactly like they looked on TV. The rest of the members of the animation company finished collecting everything and left. They said that in 10 minutes the children would be back. Before Alex's mother arrived in the garden with his child in her arms. Her face was decomposed. The little one had told her about the games they had played. And although he was very young, he didn't tell lies. In addition, his companion had corroborated everything. The parents quickly asked her what was going on, and she told them what his son had related to her. At that moment, the mothers of the three children who had left in the cars began to cry. "They've taken them! They've taken them!" They immediately called the police, who didn't take long to reach the home. There they waited a little time in case the organizers returned with the children, but an hour later no one returned. So they launched a comprehensive search operation. Checking the nearby cameras, they found that 3 streets below they moved the kids to a black van. And that was the goal. They searched for hours but found nothing. That van had vanished, and there was no sign of the children. In the end, 2 of them ended up turning up in a border country. They were about to be sold to organized groups. The third took longer to find out. In the end, he was found dead in a city dump. That thematic party left a deceased, 2 children with significant traumas, shattered parents, and a completely broken woman. Alex's mother could not forgive herself for having contacted them, and she was never the same person again.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you on the next episode.